welcome to Black Hat Asia 2020, a virtual event. 2020 has been an unprecedented year with so many new challenges. The critical work you all do to secure our digital world is more important now than ever before. And bringing all of you, the Black Hat community, together to discuss the latest research, trends, and best practices is vital. While our event is entirely online this year, the Black Hat team and the review board have made every effort to provide you with the same high standard of Black Hat content to help you. This includes more than 15 technical trainings, and it includes 40+ Black Hat briefings over 18 tracks covering the latest security research from the global community. Outside of our trainings and our briefings programs, we have a wide variety of content that is available to all attendees. We have over 30 open source tools being demonstrated in the Black Hat arsenal, and many sponsored sessions on current trends and best practices being presented by many of our partners. Our keynotes and review board lock notes are also open to all attendees. We have a packed agenda with the best content, and we hope you enjoy your time with us. It's now my pleasure to welcome Jeff Moss to provide his opening remarks, but first a little bit about Jeff. In addition to founding both Black Hat and DEF CON, Jeff has served as Vice President and Chief Security Officer at ICANN. He is an advisor with the U.S. Homeland Security Advisory Council and a commissioner with the Global Council on the Stability of Cyberspace. Please join me in welcoming the Dark Tangent, Jeff Moss.
Welcome to Black Hat Asia, Singapore 2020. This is the first year we've done this virtually since the year 2000 when we started coming to Singapore. And so I'd like to welcome you, and I'd like to congratulate you for taking a risk and going online. So, who am I? I'm Jeff Moss. I'm the founder of Black Hat, and I'd like to welcome you and give you a little bit of our history. For those of you who are new in the audience, we do a couple of things before we kick off and I introduce the keynote. I want to talk a little bit about who's in the audience, and then I want to talk a little bit about what we do to try to grow the audience and the diversity, and then give you a couple thoughts about where I think things are going to sort of frame the talks and the conversations that we'll be having over the next 2 days. So let's kick this off. Who's in the audience? We have representatives from 112 different countries. And out of those 112 countries, we have representatives from 28 countries with only a single person. And so I normally read through the list, call out, give kudos to those who are there, shouldering the burden of being the sole person representing their culture. And virtually now, you can maybe raise your hand virtually during a break and say, hey, I'm from Palau, anybody else from a nearby country, and try to network, try to meet some of your peers from around the region and grow your connections. So here we go. Albania, Algeria, Angola, Armenia, Azerbaijan, the Bahamas, Bhutan, Bulgaria, Costa Rica, Estonia, Finland, Liechtenstein, Macau, Madagascar, Mali, Malta, Mongolia, Mozambique, Palau, Romania, Seychelles, Slovakia, Tanzania, US Virgin Islands, Uruguay, Venezuela, and last but not least, Zimbabwe. So thank you for making the trek digitally all this way and getting involved. Second part is we really do try to get more people involved every year. And starting about 5 years ago, Black Hat started a program of offering free admission to those who qualified, students, teachers, military veterans, and we've extended that program this year and continued it for Singapore. So we have scholarships that we've given away to 75 students to attend that wouldn't normally have the financial means to get into a Black Hat until maybe further along in their career. But we really want to try to grow that next generation. Also, we have 35 Women in Security scholarships, trying to increase gender diversity, 10 educator scholarships, and 25 passes donated to the Singapore Cybersecurity Agency for their career mentoring program. So why is diversity so important? Well, global perspectives are going to become key in the direction of technology in the next decade. And why is this? Well, people are saying that the 2020s to the 2030s is the decade of tech. Now, we've heard that since the dot-com bubble, but what's different here is we're on the threshold of several breakthroughs of technology. The explosive growth in computing power has led to ML and AI breakthroughs, and this will continue with Moore's law in the next decade. So expect more consequence, more impact from AI and ML. We're going to have more in bio breakthroughs. Don't forget robot breakthroughs. And then there's going to be something going on in quantum computing. And for 5G, 6G. What's happening here is as the technology spreads around the globe and becomes more important in everybody's lives, governments are going to be looking to us to try to interpret the risks and provide advice on the security around these technologies. And something I'm fond of saying is that internet problems are global problems. And this is really a reflection that if there's an attack in one country, it might impact routing for other countries. If one country does a BGP hijack, it might suck in traffic from a third uninvolved party. And to resolve these conflicts and these tensions, you're going to have conversations with people in countries other than your own. You're going to have to understand other cultures, other languages. And so therefore, I think a more diverse cybersecurity population will only benefit us going forward, only benefit companies, and help us understand how the technology is being used. But there's a corollary to this, which is global problems are now internet problems. The tensions between states have bled over to the internet, and this became really obvious in the 2016 election in the United States. Russia really took it to America online. Instead of sort of behind the scenes or diplomatically or through economic sanctions, it became really an online internet problem. And as other countries learn from that, you see the techniques used by Russia, disinformation, information operations, multiplying. This is just going to be a constant background to the world we live in. Add on top of that supply chain issues and the immediacy of any time there's a global issue, a pandemic, fires in California, there's phishing campaigns ready to roll, botnets globally deployed. So I think in the past, maybe the technology and security problems are very stovepipe, very limited. Going forward, they're going to become much more global. And because of that, policymakers or companies are really going to turn to us to provide sort of a third party or more of an independent perspective. What does this all mean? How do we design our product to comply with the GDPR? What are the security risks of housing all of our PII inside China if we want to do business there? So I think that's key. And at the same time, we're just discovering a new form of diplomacy, which I'm calling app diplomacy. And this is a reflection of recent conflict on the Indian-China border between China and India, where some Indian military were killed in a conflict. And India could have decided to respond by escalating, but instead they de-escalated and went to an economic response by banning ByteDance's TikTok application on the Indian App Store. So this becomes an economic response, nuanced in that it's through to an app, and had a $6 billion market cap consequence. So real economic pain, lateral thinking, sort of asymmetric in response, great, didn't involve blowing things up. But on the other hand, it's now a new way for companies and countries to respond. Don't like your economic competitor, maybe you pull their app. Want country A, doesn't like country B, ban some of their apps from your store. And this has the impact of fragmenting the internet. So I can predict confidently, unfortunately, that the future will hold a more fragmented internet. And a more fragmented internet, while it doesn't serve anybody's best interest, it's really convenient and attractive for a number of reasons. One is you sort of know who your friends are. In a fragmented internet, you could say we're the rule of law countries, and those are the authoritarian countries. And it's really convenient for sorting who your friends and enemies may be. Right? Well, while that's convenient, that's maybe not the best for world peace and efficiency and an open, free, and interactive internet. But that's the world we're going in, and that's the world we're going to be operating in. And so I want you to just take a minute and think about that. You're going to intentionally or unintentionally over the next 4 or 5 years end up picking sides. You're going to find yourself naturally gravitating more toward platforms that are maybe more open or maybe more controlling. You're going to be working for a company that's building technology maybe to surveil and potentially repress people with facial recognition or create profiles, or maybe you're working for companies like a Microsoft that says, we're not doing facial recognition anymore. Right? So you're going to end up working for companies or governments that reflect your moral values. Or maybe not. Maybe you just don't care. Right? Maybe you want to be like Switzerland and not pick a side. Not picking is also picking, by the way. That's not an escape valve for you. So when you're doing this, just don't forget that the companies and the governments and the way you've made your decisions will greatly influence the internet of the future, the internet our children inherit. And if you fragment the internet too much in the next few years, our children will grow up in a world that is not like our world. Right? You fight too much online on the internet, and the ISPs and the carriers will redesign the internet to be more safe. But in doing so, it'll be fundamentally different than the internet we have today. So keep that in mind. I would like to also talk a little bit about why I'm so excited about Singapore as a location for Black Hat. And I was excited this way 20 years ago, but a little bit more now for a number of reasons. One, Singapore really has a commitment to the rule of law. And that's led to a couple of outcomes, I believe. One is they're a big routing superpower in Southeast Asia. If you look at a map of where all the fiber terminates, and a ton of it transits through Singapore. Because of that, there's more and more data centers here. It's becoming sort of a data haven. That rule of law provides a certain amount of transparency and predictability that allows companies to invest. And because of that, Singapore also has one of the highest educated populations. It's very quick to adapt. They're a big exporter of high technology. So I think they're suited very well to become an influencer in the area. They're not like in America or China or Germany, where their market power is so great it can swing things. But what they can do is provide sort of a moral guidance on where this all leads. And so that's why I'm really excited to introduce our keynote speaker. So for day one, our keynote speaker is Brigadier General Gaurav Kirti. He's also known as Yoda. He was a former Air Force pilot, and in the military he has also held roles in capability development, innovation, and in his final tour of duty, he's responsible for the cyber defense of the Air Force. As Deputy Chief Executive Development in the Cybersecurity Agency, or the CSA, Gaurav oversees the cybersecurity capability and ecosystem development to keep Singapore's cyberspace safe and secure. He also has, on his personal side, he's graduated from Stanford and Harvard and has a passion and has founded numerous nonprofit digital startups, and is also the national lead for Tech for Good, the volunteer-run organization. And I first met Gaurav several years ago at the Paris Peace Forum, and we hit it off, and I was really impressed with his depth of experience and his perspective, and I knew he was going to be someone who could really vocalize and help explain, provide guidance for this next generation going forward, where Singapore sees it's going. So anyway, it's my honor and privilege to introduce Day One keynote, General Gaurav. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor and it's a pleasure. I'm excited and surprised and a little bit disappointed to be here. I'm excited because this is Black Hat, and holy cow, I'm speaking at it. This is incredibly exciting, at least to me. I've watched Black Hat online for many years, I've learned so much, and to be given this opportunity is a real honor. I'm also surprised, and once you Google me, you'll also be surprised. What on earth is an ex-Air Force pilot doing at Black Hat? Is he at the wrong event? Should he be at a different conference, black flight helmet or something else? How did I end up being responsible for driving cybersecurity capability development in Singapore? Finally, I'm also a bit disappointed Because frankly, when I got the invitation to speak at Black Hat, I was really excited to meet the people, chat with you guys, have a beer, and feel this amazing community spirit. Well, hopefully next year. So at this point, you're probably wondering, what am I doing here? Who am I? And I am a relative newcomer to the cybersecurity industry, but I'm looking forward to being part of it over the years. I studied computer science many years back before cybersecurity was even a subject. I don't think it was even a real word in the 90s. But despite my promising start, I signed up to become an Air Force pilot. And 20 years of being in the military was an interesting experience, quite different from cybersecurity. I must say that last year at the keynote speech when Mikko Hipponen spoke about how many fighters our Air Force had, I definitely sat up a little bit straighter. My pilot call sign is Yoda, long story, but because of my tech background and my interest in technology, all of the tools I built, I was appointed as the Chief Innovation Officer of the Air Force and the Commander for the Air Defense and Operations Command in my final tour. That command is responsible for all of the operations that we run, obviously. And if you think it sucks to get your social media account hacked, well, I was responsible for the cyber defense of all of our networked missiles, radars, control systems, and aircraft. So that really would suck. And so I took cybersecurity extremely seriously in that tour. One thing led to another, and here I am at the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore. I'm now responsible for redesigning how we defend Singapore, from blue teaming to red teaming to all of the capabilities in between. And I wanted to use this keynote to share with you a few thoughts, well, more like questions actually, that I've been reflecting on as I take on this journey. And because I come from a non-traditional background, I thought it might be useful to draw inspiration from unlikely sources. So here we go. Now, the first thing I've realized is that defending a country is not the same as defending a network. I know that this audience is full of people who know how to defend and attack corporate networks, but unfortunately, I cannot just extrapolate the techniques for defending a network to defend Singapore. A country has bounded geography, but there are many related and unrelated network topologies that kind of crisscross inside the borders. They have dependencies on network topologies outside our borders. They interact in intricate ways to provide an essential service to people. And defending this open, interconnected network, this digital space within a geographical area, is infinitely more complex than defending a corporate network. One of the first lessons I learned in cybersecurity was know your assets. Well, try doing that on the scale of a country. I think I could retire before I figured out what our assets were. Now, complicating this even further is that Singapore isn't content to just be on the internet. No, we want to be a smart nation, a leading light that showcases how we can use digital technologies to make our citizens' lives better. Digitizing everything from lampposts to traffic lights. And when you digitize everything at that scale, cybersecurity professionals step back and think, attack vectors. I see attack vectors everywhere. And it's true. So the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore has a pretty expansive mission. We keep our cyberspace safe and secure to underpin our national security, power a digital economy, and protect our digital way of life. I'll cover 4 broad questions in this speech. Should cybersecurity be a public good or a private good? Should users or vendors be responsible for cybersecurity? Should cybersecurity be a policy problem or an engineering problem? And should cybersecurity be a cost or a benefit to manufacturers? And I'll wrap all of this up and kind of answer that big question. How do we defend Singapore? So let's start with the first question. Should cybersecurity be a public good or a private good? And it starts with Econs 101. What is a public good? A public good in economics is one that is non-excludable and non-rivalrous. Lampposts, for example, are a public good. They're non-excludable. I cannot exclude you from enjoying the light of this lamppost just by standing underneath it. It's non-rivalrous. My benefit from enjoying this light doesn't prevent you from benefiting and enjoying this light. Public goods are therefore a bit of a complicated problem in provision, and governments generally step in to provide public goods because it's difficult for the private market to price these things. So things like clean water, national defense, These are public goods. The opposite of a public good is a private bad. I'm just kidding, it's a private good. And a private good is built by companies, many of you work for them, and sold to consumers. I am one of them. So asking whether cybersecurity should be a public good or a private good is actually a really important question. Because if we decide that it is a private good, purely a private good, then I can end this speech very quickly because it's not my problem, it's your problem. Please defend Singapore, thank you very much. But if we decide that it is a public good, then you can all zone out because it's not your problem, it's my problem. I will defend the internet for you. Clearly, this is a false dichotomy, and the answer is somewhere in between. But I want to push this conversation further because it's an important question. Now, there are lessons that we can learn about public goods and how we deal with it in Singapore from Singapore's experience with policing. When you walk through the streets in Singapore, even at night, 93% of people feel safe. The Economist Intelligence Unit ranked us as the second safest city in the world. And how do we do this, and what lessons can cybersecurity learn from it? Well, we have police who patrol the streets, they're part of the neighborhoods, and the Singapore Police Force provides a public good called security. To reduce the risk that gangs of armed robbers are roaming my neighborhood, they do public good called security. But that said, I still invest in private security. I invest in locks on my door, I have cameras at home, and I have an alarm system. But I know what type of threats I'm responsible for defending myself against, and what type of threats I can rely on the police to protect me from. I've come to a good balance in that sense of how much security the government provides and how much users provide. But in the digital world, do we have the right balance? Should we continue to expect users to protect themselves against all threats, big and small? Let me give another example to make this even clearer. This time from public sanitation, basically water and sewage. Literally, up until the 1800s, nations treated drinking water the way we currently treat cybersecurity. Governments would warn their people, don't drink dirty water. Do not mix your poop water with your drinking water. It is your responsibility to boil the water and make sure you're not drinking dirty water. Governments truly believed that the users were the weakest link, and they kept drinking dirty water and dying of all sorts of disgusting diseases. Now, it became a public health problem because these diseases were contagious. Rather than just affecting a private user, one person's lack of water hygiene spread to become many people's health problem. So governments decided to change their mental model, and they built these vast networks of plumbing and sewage to provide people with clean water straight from the tap. They realized that clean drinking water is a public good to some extent, because the problem affected the whole national health state. Today, with modern filtration, you can turn on the tap and drink the water. We've curbed the problems of people contracting strange diseases through contaminated water by making it easier to drink clean water. Now, not everybody drinks water from the tap. Industries obviously need highly pure water, and they buy that. People drink bottled water, and some hipsters put fruit in little copper tubes to ionize their water. People have their own balance of what type of water they want to drink from the private market and the public market. There's a balance. So where are we for cybersecurity? I think you can recognize from my not so subtle analogy that we're still around the 1800s. Some parts have moved forward, but generally our view is we're warning people, don't drink dirty water, and if you're drinking it and dying, it's probably your fault. That may still be necessary, but I don't think it's sufficient. Cyber hygiene is becoming a public health crisis, just like water sanitation. It's no longer a private problem. Now, as more users connect to the internet, whether it's through their laptops, their phones, their smartwatches, their baby cameras, their Wi-Fi routers, we need to be worried about our essential services being DDoSed by botnets, just like the Mirai attacks in 2016. One user's lack of cyber hygiene actually now translates to a contagion which can affect other users, just like how all of the Wi-Fi routers and printers were hijacked to disrupt my online streaming access. So we need to start thinking of how we can provide clean drinking water from the tap and make sure that any poo in the water is taken out upstream at the filtration plants. Now, the analogy isn't perfect, it's not a pure public good, but it gives you a sense of where a bet is drawn and what kind of answers we could have for the cybersecurity digital world. How much should governments be responsible for? I don't quite know the answer, But I do know we should be responsible for much more. And in Singapore, we're rolling out the Safer Cyberspace Master Plan, which is our master plan to build a safer cyberspace. It's to protect all users, small and big. And it's ambitious, it seeks to rebalance this equation, and to provide that clean drinking water from the tap. We want to make Singapore one of the most cyber-secure nations in the world. I don't want to reveal too much about it because next week at the Singapore International Cyber Week, we'll be announcing all of the details, so stay tuned for that, and I urge you to attend if possible. So the second question. Now that we've explored the role of what government should be in the provision of public goods, let's dive a little bit deeper into the private goods market. There are two parties involved in the transaction: the consumers, the customers, the users, and the producers, the vendors, the OEMs, the developers. Today, we largely hold users responsible for cybersecurity. I built the cloud, but you as the customer are responsible for configuring it. And if you configured it wrongly, it's your fault. You need to have a stronger password because you registered on my website. Now, I've interfaced with many industries over my career, but the cybersecurity industry is always a little bit of a strange one to me. In most sectors, the customer is always right. But in cybersecurity, it's actually acceptable to tell the user to their face that the user is the weakest link. The customer is wrong. It's unusual, and I argue it's unhealthy. It creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where our wider industry doesn't take full accountability and responsibility and ownership for this problem. And I know that we pride ourselves on being separate from the software developer sectors, but we need to be careful in how we apply this distinction in front of the public. Allow me to now draw some unusual lessons from the automotive industry to explain this. You've probably heard this analogy a few times, but cybersecurity is like the brakes on a car. While technically brakes are the things that slow you down, actually brakes are the thing without which you dare not go fast. Good brakes actually help you have the confidence to go faster. It's a useful analogy, and even though you've heard it many times, I argue we don't push it far enough. When you buy a car salesman comes up to you and says, this is a good car, it's got a good engine, it's got good wheels, it's got good brakes, and it costs this much. You do not go to a car showroom to hear the car designer, the engine designer, and the brakes designer have an argument about whose responsibility is to prevent you from crashing. They sort that argument out behind the scenes, they have their robust debates, and they come to a conclusion before they launch the car. Customers expect good brakes to be part of a good car. They don't want to hear your arguments in front of them, and it confuses customers and it reduces car sales. Another lesson from the car industry. Actually, cars became a lot more popular when they became safer and easier to drive safely. Today, you don't need to know what a carburetor is and all the other parts of a car in order to drive it. The automotive industry got to where it is today because they realized that drivers are an essential part of the industry's ecosystem. They didn't blame bad drivers as external actors. They didn't blame them for the accidents. No, they learned from the accidents that bad drivers had. And they recognized bad drivers will continue to exist. But they learned the lessons, and they built crumple zones. They built airbags. They built better seat belts. They built forward sensors, reverse sensors, cameras, blind spot alerts. They learned lessons from accidents and made safer cars so you don't need to be a car engineer. I'm an Air Force pilot, so this trend is even starker in aviation. Modern civil airliners can fly themselves pretty much all the way, safely. And some aircraft are so advanced that pilots barely need to touch the controls. We need to take these lessons and engineer more secure products that basically protect the users, instead of designing more and more complex auditing procedures or post hoc measures to slap on security at the end of it, because that's not an effective approach. Cybersecurity has evolved to become a complex monster that even the initiated professionals find it challenging to understand. But that's not useful. Cybersecurity needs to be usable in order to be effective. It needs to be inclusive. Every person is part of our ecosystem, small and big, not just the technically savvy ones. Even at the government level, we're taking this message on board by taking DevSecOps and making it our way of launching products. We're trying to simplify security as part at the national level to make it easier for developers to adopt best practices. Some examples. We've pushed out SingPass as the National Digital Biometric Authentication System, and we're enabling important apps like those from the banking sector to access it for authentication. We simplify the back end so that the users, the developers, don't have to think about it so much. And it makes it invisible, or nearly invisible to the user, part of a seamless and convenient experience. We want to make the secure process the easier process. Just like it's really hard to dig up a well in your backyard, boil the water, and drink it, it's easier to drink water straight from the tap. And now the cleaner experience, the safer experience, is the better experience. People adopt better habits when it is convenient to do so, and revert back to bad habits when it is inconvenient. So we want the secure way to be the easier way. We see the industry doing this, and we encourage it. We move on now to the third question. But the summary of my first two questions is basically users, vendors, and governments have a part to play. No surprises there. But it's interesting to note that for this question, should cybersecurity be a policy problem or an engineering problem, we find that different parts have different answers. Governments have generally taken a very policy-centric approach to the problem thus far. There's a problem with internet security. We'll put in laws, regulations, and policies to make sure that our message is loud and clear. Singapore has a Cybersecurity Act. Industry, on the other hand, has taken a very engineering-centric approach to the problem, partly because they can't set policies. So there's a specific problem with internet security. Buy my new product, it has artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, and robots. But I think, as usual, the answer is somewhere in between. Governments need to take a more engineering approach to the problem to complement policies. Again, using cars as an example. It's easy to put speed limits all over the road. But that's a policy solution, not fully an engineering solution. An engineering solution is thinking about speed humps, thinking about speed cameras. And now they have such sophisticated speed cameras that it detects your average speed over a long road rather than just your speed at a point in time. Now that's a clever engineering approach to slowing down cars. I think you can see the pattern to my answers. It's not extremes, but somewhere in the middle. Blending engineering, policy, economics, legislation, social and organizational behavior. And that's Singapore's approach. We sometimes place engineers to write policies and non-technical people to write capability development. But our end goal is to make sure that we have taken this problem and approached it from all directions. We move now to the fourth question. Now, I'm talking so much about cars because quite recently I exchanged my gas-guzzling car for a smaller hybrid car. I did a lot of research, otherwise known as car shopping. And one thing I realized that because I'm now the father of a little boy, I'm no longer looking for the coolest car that is befitting of the image of an Air Force pilot. No, I spent a tremendous and inordinate amount of time looking for the safest car, comparing safety features. And in the end, I actually ended up paying more for a car with better safety features. What I noticed was that cars were competing and branding themselves on safety. This brings me to that last question. Can cybersecurity be seen as a benefit rather than a cost to manufacturers? Now, in the past few years, we've done well to elevate and escalate cybersecurity to become a management concern at the board level. But they're still taking the discussions as a delicate trade-off between cost and balance, but cost and benefit, sorry, between security and usability. And sometimes there's a race to the bottom where they try and spend the minimum amount on cybersecurity just to meet compliance requirements. The discussions are driven by the mental model that cybersecurity is a cost, and it's a cost they have to bear to do business. Customers do not reward good cybersecurity habits, but they heavily punish bad cybersecurity habits. Can we flip this around and make cybersecurity a selling point to customers as they become more conscious of their safety and security? Again, we learned lessons from unusual sources: food labels and air conditioners. First, food labels. We realized that cybersecurity benefits are actually quite invisible to the user. But similar to how we highlight the nutritional value and ingredients of food products on the side of most of them, if you care about your diet, you can take a look at the label and avoid the sugary drinks. If you are on a specific keto diet, you can again check the label and buy the food that suits your requirements. But today, I have no way to look at a router and decide, this router is more secure than that router. It's invisible to me, and customers cannot pay for what they cannot see. So we started thinking, what if we could put a nutrition label on IoT devices, on digital products? That's exactly what we're doing. We will be introducing the Cybersecurity labeling scheme on network-connected devices, and we've got a range from 1-star to 4-star, 4 being the best. Again, I don't want to give away too much. We'll be announcing all of the details next week, but think of it like nutrition labels for food, except now on products. We also learned from air conditioners. Many years ago, air conditioners were terribly energy inefficient. And so Singapore introduced what we call the 5-tick system. Over time, it became very popular, and today you can't buy an air conditioner that doesn't have ticks or has 1 tick. Every air conditioner advertises itself on 4 ticks or 5 ticks. Some are even making up a 6th tick. This is a fantastic race to the top, and we want this to happen in cybersecurity. We want to educate consumers, and we want to encourage and incentivize manufacturers to build better, safer, more secure products so that the whole ecosystem moves up. It's a race to the top rather than a race to the bottom for the lowest cost. We've taken quite a long journey now across 4 big questions and from highly unusual sources. These 4 questions bring me to the biggest question on my mind. How do I defend a nation? How do I defend Singapore? And the answer in my mind requires us to change our mental models on what cybersecurity is and how we do it. First, cybersecurity is both a public good and a private good. So the government will be taking a more proactive approach in securing the cyberspace for our users together with our industry partners. Second, we want to design digital tools that are more secure by design so that the more convenient option for users is the safer and more secure option. Third, we want to complement our strong policies with clever engineering solutions. And fourth, we want cybersecurity to be seen as a benefit, not just a cost. And we want the whole ecosystem to move upwards to build better, safer products for users. I don't know what the right answers are. I don't know what the perfect solution is going to look like. But I hope that we're asking at least some of the right questions. I still have much to learn. So I hope to be back here regularly and get to know more of you, get to learn from more of you, and be part of the audience in future. Thank you so much for your attention. And I look forward to hearing your views on this speech. I'm sure there are enough hackers in this audience so you can all find my email. Thank you very much.